Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks so much for inviting me to this conference. As you can see that my talk bears the title, The Christian Faith in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, Pitfalls and Ways Forward. And my talk consists of three parts. Part one is about Christian responses to AI, Christian paths that have been taken so far. So this part of my talk will serve as a kind of status questionis. The second part will introduce the concept of the reading of culture as a concept and a possible new path for Christianity in the age of artificial intelligence. And part three will be a specific Christian reading of culture, an attempt at a Christian reading of culture and the cultural dynamics around AI. So let's start with part one, Christian responses to AI. So the first possible response has to do with rethinking theological anthropology. This response to AI is about searching for differences between human beings and AI, trying to save the Christian idea of human uniqueness. This whole response boils down to the definition of the biblical notion of the human being as imago Dei. If it is possible to define imago Dei in a way that includes human beings and excludes AI, the idea of human uniqueness is saved. So there is a quote here by an AI theologian who represents this line of thinking theological anthropology. And it reads, theological anthropology has much to gain from engaging with AI, comparing ourselves to intelligence machines, far from endangering our uniqueness, might instead lead to a better understanding of what makes humans genuinely distinctive and in the image of God. So this quote is by Marius Doropanto, a theologian very active on the field of AI and theological reflection on AI. So this is the first possible Christian response. The second is about AI as a possible agent or subject of theology and religion. This Christian response to AI might sound ridiculous to you, but it is taken seriously by quite a few theologians and scholars of religion. This response assumes a future scenario in which AI is so advanced that it is believed to be able to have its own spirituality and religious ideas and religious sentiments. Again, however ridiculous this might sound, there are theologians and scholars who argue about what kind of theological ideas and religious sentiments such an AI might have or could have. The problem with this response to AI is the same as with the previous one. It is closer to the field of science fiction than to reality. It's quite representative of this approach of Christian response to AI through positing AI as a possible agent and subject of religion is the 2024, one of the 2024 issue by the journal Zygon, Journal for Religion and Science. In this journal there is a whole section on the subject of religious robots, or whether robots and AI could be religious. The next possible approach of Christian response is about AI's relevance for moral theology. Its primary concern is with an ethical implementation of AI in society, with respect for human dignity, human freedom, social equality, and the common good. All in all, an implementation of AI in agreement with the social teaching of the Catholic Church. I think this approach has more value than the previous two, and is more prevalent than the other two. Now there is, for instance, the whole AI ethics industry in Catholic academic institutions. Yet this approach is characterized by a certain narrowness. That is, a narrow focus on those moral and social issues on which AI has a direct impact. For instance, the Journal of Moral Theology in 2022, in an issue dedicated, not just the whole section, the whole issue was dedicated to artificial intelligence, and it is quite representative of this line of Christian approach to AI, true moral theology, and true Christian social ethics. What is also worth mentioning is that the position of the Holy See on AI and its focus on social issues and ethics, which is quite akin to the approach of moral theology. And let me show you a quote from the message of Pope Francis that he gave on the World Day of Peace in 2024, and I'm going to show you two quotes from, one quote from this message by the Holy Father. And the quote says, to speak in the plural of forms of intelligence can help to emphasize above all the unbreachable gap between such systems and the human person. The use of the plural likewise brings out the fact that these devices greatly differ among themselves, and they should always be regarded as social-technical systems. Italics mine here, so the emphasis is mine, for the impact of any artificial intelligence device, regardless of its underlying technology, depends not only on its technical design. So it's very important these are not just technical systems, but social systems to which we very much need to pay attention. And this quote takes us to part 2 of my talk about the reading of culture, and especially the reading of culture around AI, around the dynamics of AI, as a new Christian path or possible Christian response to artificial intelligence. But before getting back to artificial intelligence, let me say a few words about the concept of reading culture, the reading of culture. What does it mean? What is the history of this concept? So it has a secular origin, this concept. The modern practice of reading culture, especially contemporary culture as a whole, with all its coherence and incoherence, consistencies and inconsistencies, had a secular origin in modernity. The practice arose in the 1950s, in an era when the humanities were dominated by schools of semiotics and structuralism and their ways of questioning. The first groundbreaking work to define this practice was the 1927 book by French philosopher and literary critic Roland Barthes. The book is a fascinating survey of French culture in the post-war period, drawing attention to the most unexpected details, particularly in popular culture, from films to newspaper photographs, from spectacles like wrestling to various industrial products. In this reading of culture and cultural analysis, the author pursues a science of semiotics, scrutinizing culture as an overarching system of science, and at the same time, identifying what he calls myths or mythologies, comprehensive societal beliefs, and dreams typical of the society of his time. More or less at the same time as this book appeared. So more or less at the same time as Roland Barthes came to practice his secular reading of culture, a similar turn towards modern culture as a whole took place in the Catholic Church in the run-up to Vatican II and at Vatican II itself. Accordingly, the Second Vatican Council introduced the hermeneutics of interpreting the signs of the times as a practice of reading contemporary culture. Now there are two quotes from the Pastoral Constitution Gaudium et Spes from chapter 2 and 4, and it reads, the Council focuses its attention on the word of man, the whole human family, along with the sum of those realities in the midst of which it lives. Italics mine again. To carry out such a task, the Church has always had the duty of scrutinizing the signs of the times and of interpreting them in the light of the Gospel. Italics mine again. Today, the human race is involved in a new stage of history. Profound and rapid changes are spreading by degrees around the whole world. Hence, we can already speak of a true cultural and social transformation on one which has repercussions on man's religious life as well. So you can see it's a very interesting quote because so it's not only about the Catholic Church and Christianity having a mission to contemporary culture and society, but we can learn from contemporary culture and society. Contemporary culture and society can have repercussions and influences on our religious lives. And I think it rings familiar in our time, quite applicable to in our attempts to understand the religious significance of artificial intelligence and the possible Christian responses to artificial intelligence. The practice of the reading of culture had been present in the Christian tradition from much before Vatican II, since the early Middle Ages, although it didn't aim at the culture of the time, but primarily at the classical culture of antiquity. This practice was part of what came to be called ars legendi or studium legendi. The ars legendi was in part the discipline of reading classical antiquity, and it was established by early medieval scholars as Cassiodorus or Isidore of Seville. These scholars considered the texts of a great number of classical authors to be vehicles of truth, which, although inferior to the truth of Holy Scripture, can hugely contribute to scriptural reading. On the whole, it was the reading of Scripture, the Christian fathers, and the reading of classical antiquity together that made up the corpus of ars legendi. The great classic of the ars legendi genre, providing an introduction not only into the reading of Holy Scripture, but into the reading of the whole cultural tradition, is the 12th century theologian Hugh of St. Victor. His educational opus magnum, great work, the Didascalicon or Ars Legendi, has as a distinctive mark that it aims to lead students to meditation, not only to the reading of Scripture and through the reading of what was called the 7 liberal arts in the Middle Ages, but also through the reading and knowledge of what Hugh terms as the 7 artes mechanicae or mechanical arts, that is, 7 branches of medieval craftsmanship. Accordingly, if, in Hugh's understanding, reading and meditation are the pathways to wisdom, reading and meditation partly aim at layers of culture that were traditionally considered quite low. Indeed, reading and meditation aim at these lower layers of culture alongside Scripture and alongside the high culture of antiquity and the Middle Ages. So I'm going to present briefly, so we are getting back to AI now, so the culture, reading of culture around AI, the cultural dynamics of AI. So I'm going to present briefly a way in which a Christian reading of contemporary culture can unfold with a focus on the cultural dynamics around AI. The 2015 book, The Black Box Society by Frank Pasquale, is about the profound hiddenness that envelopes the algorithms and data processing in information society, which does end up, as it were, in a black box. So it's almost completely unknown what is going with these algorithms. This black box, this is most characteristic of AI, is impenetrable not only to its average users, but also to those experts who run it. One definitely gets the impression from this book and from what it describes that the most decisive things in our society are, let's say, moving in the dark, completely out of sight. This momentous experience of hiddenness and the unknown in society has led and is going to lead to various correlated phenomena, like the suspicion and unease around cryptocurrencies or the spread of conspiracy theories. The experience of the hiddenness of things, as it were, moving in the dark, which has a lot to do with the nature of AI and its effects, has a counterpart in another cultural experience, likewise driven by AI and influenced by AI, and this is what can be called the revealing of truth through pattern recognition. The meme of pattern recognition as a revealing of truth has kept cropping up in 21st century culture everywhere. So in the 2001 film, A Beautiful Mind, the protagonist John Nash, played by Russell Crowe, is shown a multitude of numbers intercepted from Soviet communications channels. And he manages to single out a string of number patterns, which he identifies as geographical coordinates of attacks planned by the Soviets on American soil. There is another example, another movie. The disclosure or revealing of truth to pattern recognition plays a crucial role in the 2009 movie, Knowing, too. The film centers on the discovery of a strange document filled with numbers and the possibility that these numbers somehow record the various details of past and future disasters. In the scene, you can see the document is scrutinized by the protagonist, who is a physicist played by Nicolas Cage. There are various things to say about how pattern recognition and hiddenness as the characteristics of AI change the conditions in which Christian truth takes shape in contemporary culture. Suffice it to say that an AI-dominated culture is not, and certainly not, going to be a neutral medium or environment. But each online search, each online question and query concerning Christian truth, and each online research exploring Christian truth will proceed and unfold according to AI's own logic of truth, that is, AI's own ways of hiddenness and pattern recognition. This influence of AI is happening and will happen both technologically and also culturally, that is, through the mediation of culture. This leads to my talk concluding thesis. If our culture is now characterized and increasingly formed by the unfathomable hiddenness and methodic pattern recognition of AI algorithms, these ways of concealment and unconcealment will inescapably condition the interpretation and communication of Christian truth. And they will do so despite the fact that the letter is and remains premised upon the use of natural language. Thank you very much for your attention.